Here it is, guys, the brand new message taken by our very own Mark Pomeroy. If you haven't watched the first 2 weeks, maybe head back on this platform or check it out on any of your favorite podcast platforms.
Well, hey there, Elevate friends and family. Great to have you with us today. Now, question. Does anybody consider themselves to be a bit of an expert when it comes to assembling IKEA furniture? Maybe like you'd ace this job interview. Yeah. Well, not everyone is as good as you. Some people struggle. But let me tell you one thing that's even more difficult than assembling IKEA furniture: disassembling IKEA furniture. And the reason I know that is because I have on more than one occasion had to disassemble IKEA furniture that I had attempted to assemble. Yeah, I got it wrong. But look, I've come a long way since then. Nowadays, I am a pretty good painter, like house painter. I've dipped my toes into laying pavers, which has gone pretty well. I have a new project next week with more pavers. What else? I recently tried my hand at installing an irrigation system for Marco's Urban Farm. Now, I'd never done anything in the realm of irrigation and reticulation before, but I thought to myself, hey, what's the worst thing that could happen? So I headed to my local big box hardware store. I went to the gardening section. And within the gardening section, I made my way to the irrigation section. Now, I'm very familiar with the gardening section. I've been going in and out of the gardening section for years. However, this was my first foray into the irrigation section. And I gotta tell you, I felt instantly like I'd been teleported into a whole nother universe. Let me tell you some of what I've discovered. Solenoids, yeah, sounds like a different form of life. Elbow joints, risers, gear drive pop-up sprinklers, 15 mil and 19 mil poly everything. And so I'm just looking, and it's just like, now the challenge didn't stop there. Figuring out what all these things were and what they all did. I then had to figure out what I needed, like which of these hundreds of items did I need, and not just which items I needed, but like how many and what lengths. And look, you probably guessed, it required multiple repeat visits to my back and forth to my local big box hardware store. In fact, the thing that I found myself saying to the cashier instead of thanks was, I'll see you in a few. And sure enough, I did. But today I want to look at a guy who faced a much bigger construction challenge than IKEA furniture and reticulation. And though, like me, he had no experience. So we launched this new series 3 weeks ago called Keep the Faith. And it's really taking an opportunity to grow our faith. Faith doesn't have to be something that's fixed, static, capped. It's something that we can grow. We just need to know how to grow and then put those principles and practices consistently into play. So we've been focusing primarily on one chapter of one book or one letter in the new part of the Bible. It's the letter to a group of people known as the Hebrews. In fact, if you've got your smartphone camera, how about you scan this flow code? It's going to take you there to Hebrews chapter 11. And this letter is a letter that was written to Jewish Christians, some of whom were kind of over the persecution that they'd been facing as people who had sort of walked away from Judaism and embraced following Jesus. And they were starting to drift back and starting to return to their old ways. And so the writer, one of the things the writer did was to kind of roll out these list of incredible heroes in history who had withstood challenges and persecution and obstacles and had ultimately placed their faith in God and pressed through and done great things. In fact, this very chapter and the people listed in this chapter is often referred to as the Hall of Faith. So that's kind of what we're doing over these couple of months. We're taking a bit of a flyover through the Hall of Faith. Now, if you missed either of the first 2 weeks, you can go back and watch them on this platform, or you can listen to them on your favorite podcast app. Just type in Elevate Church Perth into the search and we'll be there, and you can follow us and you can listen to those 2 messages. Now, last week we started with a guy named Enoch, a Hall of Faith member named Enoch, who we knew very little about, but we knew enough and know enough about to have been able to learn from him. Today, I want to talk and have us learn from a guy that probably we do know quite a bit more about than Enoch, and it's a guy named Noah. Chances are some of you have heard of him. And this is what the writer of the letter to Hebrews talked about with Noah and why Noah made it into the Hall of Faith. By faith, Noah built a ship in the middle of dry land. Wait, what? He was warned about something he couldn't see and acted on what he was told. And the result? Well, his family was saved, and his act of faith drew a sharp line between the evil of the unbelieving world and the rightness of the believing world. And as a result, Noah became intimate with God. Look, I'm going to get into like what God instructed Noah to do and how Noah played it out. But just this last line, I don't want us to miss it. I almost think it's like the greatest outcome of all of the things that Noah ultimately and his family got to experience. And that was that he became intimate with God. You know, no more praying prayers like, God, are you there? God, are you interested? God, are you willing and able to help me? No, he became intimate with God, but it wasn't automatic. It was an outcome. It was the result of Noah first responding in faith to what God had instructed him to do. So here's the backstory. We're going back thousands of years now. God had created the heavens and the earth. He'd created humanity to be the managers of this. And, you know, things got off to a good start. And then things started to go a little bit janky. In fact, corruption and evil and wickedness were the characteristics of humanity in this particular point of history that we're dropping into. And things were so bad that God actually said that he regretted making humanity. So he decided he needed a do-over, like, you know, humanity version 2.0. And so he wanted to hit the reset button, starting with somebody worth building on. And the only person that God could find that was worth building humanity 2.0 on was Noah. Noah wasn't perfect, but he walked in close friendship with God. And so God actually spoke directly to Noah and gave Noah the big idea. Like, I'm fed up with creation. I'm tired of the corruption and violence, so I'm going to take the nuclear option. I'm just going to wipe everyone out, drown the earth with a flood, except for you and your wife and your kids, your sons, 3 sons, and their wives, and then creatures beyond that. So it's a big day for Noah. Kind of memorable, I would imagine. And just think about it. Like, Noah comes home that evening, and the family's sitting around the dinner table, and Noah's wife says to him, "So, honey, how was your day?" And Noah says, oh, well, yeah, I talked with God today. Oh, you talked with God today? Well, how's God doing, Noah? Noah's like, well, actually, not too good. He's going to wipe out the whole earth and all of creation with a flood. Now, Noah's family live in the desert at this point in time. So one of Noah's sons pipes up and says, Dad, what's a flood? And Noah says, actually, son, I have no idea. But it's coming. And it's all right. But we're going to be okay because God's actually instructed me to build this thing called an ark, which, yeah, I don't quite know what that is either, but he's given very specific instructions, and I'm just going to follow them, and myself and your mom and your wives are all going to be okay. But just by the way, when it comes to the time, make sure you pack light because we have to also bring 2 of every creature onto this ark as well. Yeah. Now, if you're a church veteran, it's easy for you to just sort of, nod your head because you kind of know how this plays out. But I want to maybe invite you to put that to one side and view this whole unfolding drama through the lens of being one of Noah's sons or one of Noah's daughters-in-law, because right now, in this moment at that dinner table, Noah sounded like a crazy person. And even if all this was true, you'd be like, why in the world would God choose my dad? He has no experience in nautical engineering. Like, he's technically unqualified for this. In fact, at this point, it appears the only qualification Noah has were these things. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and walked faithfully with God. It wasn't the external qualifications that caused God to choose Noah. It was when God popped the hood, he saw something worth building on. Not just an ark worth building, but humanity version 2.0 worth building on. These character qualities that stood in absolute stark contrast to the wickedness and evil of the time. And so you can read it for yourself. God laid out very specific instructions, the type of wood, the type of sealant, the dimensions, the height, the length, everything. I mean, absolutely down to the last detail. An ark built on purpose for a purpose. Now, did you know that you can actually build your life on purpose for a purpose? Yeah, you can't control every circumstance, you can't control every outcome, but you can build your life on purpose for a purpose. Now, some aspects of your life, that's going to be harder to do. For some of you, like the general kind of landscape of your life is going to make that harder to do, maybe based on circumstances or history or, a range of things. But ultimately, it's possible to build a life on purpose for a purpose. And that was exactly what Noah had been doing up to this point in time. And that's what qualified him and ultimately positioned him for God to single him out and his family to take on this project and then ultimately be the people that God built humanity version 2.01. So all I want to do is I want to give you a few pro tips of things that you can focus on so as to build a life on purpose for a purpose. The first one is you need to find the right supplier. See, when I went about beginning this reticulation irrigation system project, I didn't go down to my local TV retailer. I didn't go and visit my grocery store. No, I went to a big box hardware store, or I could have just as easily gone to a plumbing and irrigation specialist store. But the point is, the place that I went to get the raw materials mattered. The things I needed to assemble and build out this irrigation system mattered. And so it's true that who you spend time with matters. What you prioritize your time doing matters. We all fill 24 hours a day. If I wanted to construct and assemble an irrigation system, I had to go to the right supplier and put my time and energy intentionally and specifically and consistently into building that out. In fact, look, I'm just going to say this. I can probably quite accurately predict what your future is going to look like, at least large parts of it, because you're currently on that path. Every one of us are currently on the path that's leading us to a particular future. The people you're spending time with now are influencing your trajectory. The things you're spending your time on now are influencing your trajectory. In other words, you're already on the trajectory that's going to cause you to build a particular type of life. So the question is to zoom out and say, is the trajectory that I'm currently on, are the suppliers that I'm currently spending my time and energy around, are they actually causing my trajectory to be such that it's building my life on purpose, for a purpose? Because if they're not the people that you need to be spending time around, you need to find better suppliers. And one of the most obvious things, but I'm going to say it anyway, got my Captain Obvious hat on today. If you want to build your faith, and I hope you do, hello, and that's the whole point of this series, you need to very intentionally and consistently spend time around people with greater faith than you. People whose faith is at a higher altitude than you, and jump in their slipstream. And you'll find that over time, your faith will start to grow. And here's a clue who those people are. They're people who spend very little time asking the question, can I? Or can we, when it comes to something God's called them to do, and ask a better question, how can I? How can we? And then they get busy building their life, the next piece, the next step, the next stage, on purpose, for a purpose. Then there's this one, follow the instructions. Yeah, some of you are as shocked as I am that Noah, who's a male, actually not just read the instructions, but he actually followed them. Like, God gave him very specific instructions, and Noah actually followed them to the letter. Noah didn't just follow the bits that suited his schedule. He didn't work according to his own plan. What does God know? He didn't take any shortcuts. In fact, the writer of Genesis says this about Noah. At the completion of building the ark, Noah did everything just as God commanded him. Follow the instructions. In fact, take this and ask the question, could you insert your name in the place of Noah in that sentence? And Mark did everything just as God commanded him. And Bill did everything just as God commanded him. And Jane did everything just as God commanded her. That is like a lofty goal, probably an aspirational goal, but what an incredible clue of how we can build a life on purpose, for a purpose. And then this is my final pro tip: play the long game. In an era where things come and go, where people's attention spans are shrinking, where people's levels of consistency and commitment and patience and are waning, Noah spent 120 years building the ark. Because, look, starting, okay, it's not always easy. Some things, some ideas you have, you never start. But actually, when you start, that's great. But at that point in history, at that point in your timeline, and at that point in your building of your life on purpose, for a purpose, starting is often the easy part. But starting on its own is never enough. You're going to have to push through challenges. You're going to have to push through obstacles. You're going to have to push through discouragement. You're going to have to push through things that don't make sense if you want to build a life on purpose, for a purpose. I already said this. Noah didn't live near a body of water. So can you imagine he's out in the front yard building this thing? And every day his neighbors are walking past, "Hey, Noah, what you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm building an ark." And they're like, "What's an ark?" And then he explains to them, it's like this big ship. Again, they're living in the middle of a desert. They haven't seen a ship. Okay, Noah, sure, great. What do you need a ship for? You'll see. And 120 years later, Noah the madman, Noah the crazy one. Yeah. But just think of the conversations that took place at the local pub amongst the neighbors about Noah. So yeah, it's likely that he got discouraged. It's likely that he hit roadblocks and obstacles. But he took 120 years. He wouldn't have made it into the Hall of Faith if he'd stopped after the first obstacle, if he'd stopped after the first feeling of discouragement, if he'd stopped after 50 years, which sounds like a long time, but it wasn't even halfway finished at that point. He wouldn't have made it into the Hall of Faith if he'd stopped after 110 years. The clue is you finish when it's finished. That's it. And until it's finished, keep going. Determination, resilience, character, all of these things that are actually on the slide in a lot of cultures are going to be the very tools that you're going to need to build a life on purpose, for a purpose, playing the long game. Now, I'm going to finish with this. Faith is very much the foundation. And we need to build a solid foundation. And then there's some things that we can actually add to the framework. And Peter, who was one of Jesus' earliest followers, he also wrote a couple of letters to Jewish Christians. And I'm going to read a slice from one of them. So don't lose a minute in building on what you've been giving, complementing your basic faith with, and he rolls out 7, good character, spiritual understanding, alert discipline, passionate patience, reverent wonder, warm friendliness, and generous love. Each dimension fitting into and developing the others. This is what building a framework looks like. And with these qualities active and growing in your lives, no grass will grow under your feet, no day will pass without its reward as you mature in your experience of the Master Jesus. So let me just riff real quickly on each of these 7. Number 1, good character. This is about doing what's right, which Noah was known for, whether someone's watching or not. Spiritual understanding, I talked about this a lot last week, seeking God's way through His Word. Alert discipline, avoiding things that are going to take you off track, resisting the drift, staying focused, staying committed, staying on task. Passionate patience. This is what Noah did. 120 years. Passionate patience. Boldness to keep moving forward when challenged. Reverent wonder. Prayer. Talked about that last week. Fasting. Meditation. These things that allow God to take in more space in our hearts and our lives. Warm friendliness. Ever met someone that claims to be a great Christian, but they're a horrible human? Don't be that guy. Don't be that person. In fact, one of the roadblocks to you building your life on purpose, for a purpose, one of the obstacles, one of the lids is actually your interpersonal skills. If you find yourself saying, "Oh, that's not what I meant," a lot, probably your messaging isn't getting across. Anyway, I'll talk about that another time, but it's in there. And then this one, generous love. Operate from an abundance mentality, not a scarcity mentality. Well, if I give it away, what if I'm left with nothing? That's not how God operates. That's how people with a scarcity mentality operate. So here we go. Mic drop coming up. I'm going to give you some homework. Read and reread and write out and reread and listen to the audio version of the Bible app of this slice of Peter's letter. 1 Peter 1 verses 5 through 8. Spend this week just going over that and over that and over that. And take kind of like a bit of an audit. Which of these 7 areas do I really need to be giving more intentionality and consistency to building this framework on my faith? All right, friends and family, see you next week.